Hi, Armand here with your March 2019 astrology forecast. This is about my 6th time trying to do this forecast, so we'll just have to see how it goes. It may not be the best ever because it's just such a confusing month. There are more questions than answers, and I think that's going to be the case all month long. Take, for example, Mercury. Mercury is retrograde virtually the entire month. Oh, literally speaking, it's retrograde from March 5th through the 28th. Truth of the matter is that when we count these time around the stations and being deep in the shadow and then going on to meet Neptune early April, it's really all month long, which means all of those mercurial things like, contracts, communication, technology, and things like that, making YouTube videos, subject to all kinds of problems. And not only is Mercury retrograde, but Mercury is retrograde in Pisces, and he stations to retrograde at the very last degree of Pisces on March 29th, out there at 29 degrees of Pisces. It's like he's trying to climb out of this slippery sign where he's not so happy, and he's been meeting Neptune, so we've had some confusion. We've always had confusion since, early in February, and he's trying to get out of this situation. And he's like almost to Aries, and he's at the top of the hill, and he slides back down in the mud. And then he has to climb back out again, and it takes until mid-April or so for him to do that. The sense of that is that it's a very, very challenging time in terms of just getting the story straight. What is the story? What is the information we're supposed to be processing? What's real? We see that at the collective level. We see that at the personal level as well. So, lots of confusion. It's a very intuitive time, and we get that early in the month because Mercury stations to go retrograde on March 5th. On March 6th, it's the new moon in Pisces, and it's also the day that Uranus moves into Taurus. Now, the new moon in Pisces, talk about intuition, talk about going within. New moon in Pisces is really, this is like the 4 a.m. of the year. This is the inward time, the time before the dawn, the time before we start really waking up to things, when we want to kind of consult our inner selves, and Mercury retrograding at the end of Pisces helps us do that. It's like being asleep. It's a great time for meditation. It's a great time for dream work. It's a great time for anything that is intuitive, that is feeling oriented. And then Uranus goes into Taurus. And when Uranus goes into Taurus, it's like we wake up at 4 a.m. And you know what that's like. That's not the easiest thing. So you get burst awake, and maybe the dream or the nightmare that you've been having comes to you in full force. The sense of that really is intuition, the intuitive aha moment, the quiet of meditation that is suddenly met with a giant insight, or at least a significant insight. That's what this sort of seems to me to be like. This beginning of the month, the first week of the month, is characterized by this kind of energy. I said in our Relationships and Astrology video on the new moon, you should check out the Relationships and Astrology YouTube channel. I said that it's a time to line up your head and your heart, or your head with your intuition. And it really is valuable if you can get both of them on the same page. If you can get both of them on the same page. And I'm not thinking that's going to be the easiest thing to do. But if it happens, you could really get some real insights there. Are they insights that you can do something with? I don't know. It's experiential. Which is, we're here to have experiences. We're here to have knowledge about ourselves. We're here to have knowledge about where we are and who we are. So it's that kind of thing. But I don't know that it's the sort of thing that you're going to figure out, how to write the great book, how to make the great movie, or something along those lines, or even figure out how to get your new product launched or something like that. It seems to me to be very much more kind of experiential thing of knowing, in fact, maybe what to let go of. Because this is Pisces. This is Pisces that we're dealing with. So what is it that we let go of? The new moon itself is conjunct Neptune, so it has a very, very strong Piscean energy. Well, you get the idea. I won't belabor it any more than I have. First week of the month, very intuitive, inward moving. and yet flash of insight. Probably having something to do with what to release. Okay, as we go forward from the new moon up to the full moon on the 20th, we have a lot of stuff that looks actually, if Mercury wasn't retrograde, I would call this time productive. But is it going to be productive? Well, with Mercury retrograding in Pisces, it might be less productive than you'd think. But it is a good time for exploring creative projects. It probably is a time you can get a lot of stuff done in other respects as well. We have some real charge stuff like Mars is going to be trine Saturn and then trine Pluto in that period of time. So yeah, the week or so, well, the 2 weeks between the new moon and the full moon have a productive energy, a very action-oriented energy. And, Uranus is newly in Taurus. There's a lot of earthy stuff. It's a good time to build things. If you're doing verbal stuff, if you're doing working with the written word and stuff like that, it might be more of a time to review and repeat things, revise and edit. But if you're doing, actual construction of things, building things, it looks like it's a pretty good period of time. Okay, so then we get to that full moon, and that full moon happens right at the Aries ingress, the spring equinox in the northern hemisphere, on March 20th. So the sun gets into Aries and opposes the moon. So we have a full moon at 0 degrees Libra, while we have the sun at 0 degrees Aries. And this is a very, anytime you have a 0 degrees full moon, which we've been having recently, but it's on the equinox on top of all, it's very charged. I think there's a lot of things, this is typically a time when we see a lot of stuff happening in the collective anyway. But I think it is a time when there'll be a lot of activity around public matters and politics and social stuff. The feel of it for each of us individually is there's a balance between me and what I want and what I need for myself, and on the one hand relationships, but on the other hand just the rules of society. Just what are the constraints? What do manners and mores demand of us, as opposed to what do we really want? The sun is not very far away from meeting Chiron on the 22nd, and so now this is the first meeting of the sun and Chiron in Aries for some time, and we get a sense of a little bit of that sort of, while the full moon maybe makes us say, who am I, as opposed to what are the demands on me, and we might feel, with Uranus recently having gone through Aries, we might feel like, who am I and I can do it. And then the sun hits Chiron and maybe we get a little bit of doubt. Maybe that's a little bit about doubts. That's a little bit about not being so sure we want to take a leap of faith, not being so sure of ourselves, not being quite so confident. All in all, I think probably our better selfish instincts probably win out at this time, but there could be a bit of a test. Chiron represents at least a little bit of a test. So that full moon time, it's time when things come to light. It's a time when we tend to be emotionally reactive. It's a time when we're really ready to assert ourselves, with the sun having just got into Aries. We feel that life returning. We feel this. It is a springtime energy, even in the southern hemisphere. It is a return of this Aries type of energy that's very strong, and maybe it gets a little deflated, just a little bit deflated by that meeting with Chiron. On March 27th, Venus sextiles Uranus. Here we have the ability to kind of work things out in relationship. We can kind of put a balance between what I want and what you want, or rather what our relationship wants and what I want and what you want. There's a lot of things to have up in the air over here. As the month ends, we have Mars goes into the sign of Gemini. I could see it in my head, but I couldn't quite find the word for it. Mars goes into Gemini as Mercury goes direct, Mercury goes direct on the 28th, and Mars goes into Gemini on the 31st. And perhaps we start to get a little bit, not much, but a little bit of traction on some of these verbal issues, with Mercury coming around to meet Neptune again on April 2nd. I wouldn't count on being able to really be able to, work things out, get a good contract going. I wouldn't go buy a computer or a car or anything like that in the short term. But maybe we'll start to get some traction in April. There's at least some hopeful signs for that. I do want to point out, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that retrograde Mercury in Pisces is conjunct Neptune on March 24th. And so I would put from the 22nd till the 26th at least, not only pay attention to the fact that it's Mercury retrograde, but it is like a super, super Mercury retrograde. It is a time when confusion, communication problems, technological snafus are going to be, just off the charts. And Mercury is just about stationed at this period of time. So you might as well take from the 22nd all the way out to about April 3rd and just put everything that is mercurial on hiatus during that period of time. It's a really, really poor time for contracts, for cars, for communication, for technology, all of that stuff. Okay. It's not the best forecast I've ever done. It's not the clearest, but that is what we're dealing with. Or at least that's my story for the time being. That's my excuse. It's Mercury in Pisces. What could I do? See you next month.